Hi, I'm Olivia. My sister once told me, "You're not real family, just the one who pays for it." Then she banned me from the house our father built, the same house I helped her keep. Everyone believed her lies. I stayed quiet, until the day the bank called me owner. That's when everything changed. I pulled into the driveway like I had 100 times before, the gravel crunching under my tires as if nothing had changed. A dish of mashed potatoes rested in the passenger seat, still warm, covered in foil. My hands smelled like thyme and butter, a reminder of the care I'd put into preparing them. I hadn't even bothered to check the group text. Dinner at Marlene's on Sunday was just what we did. But as I reached the porch, something felt off. Marlene opened the door before I could knock. Her eyes didn't smile. Her hands stayed at her sides. "You shouldn't have come, Olivia," she said flatly. I blinked. "What?" "You're not welcome here anymore." The words landed cold. I looked behind her. Our cousin Lydia peeked from the kitchen, then ducked out of sight. My niece opened the door just enough to take the dish from my hands, mumbling a thanks before disappearing. And that was it. I stood there, 35 minutes from home, with nothing in my hands and everything in my chest. No explanation. No fight. No goodbye. I turned, walked back to my car. Not a single person looked me in the eye. Inside the silence of the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles tight. I didn't start the car. I just sat, staring at that familiar house, the one that once smelled like cinnamon at Christmas, where we used to fight over who got the wishbone. Now, apparently, I was the outsider. It's funny. You spend years showing up, putting your life second. And one day, they shut the door like you were never meant to be part of it. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow. I drove, letting the road take me somewhere, anywhere. And with every passing mile, the old memories began pressing against the present. Years ago, I slept on a vinyl hospital bench while my father recovered from a stroke. My back ached for days. Marlene had texted that she couldn't leave work. Lydia had a thing. So I stayed. I stayed when Mom needed help after her fall. I bought her new shoes with my own money, adjusted her shower rails, and took time off from the library just to keep her company through the long afternoons. Nobody saw that. Nobody clapped. But they all sure remembered to ask, "Can you take care of this too?" I wasn't loud. I didn't demand recognition. Somebody had to be the grown-up. So I was. When the bills piled up, I dipped into my savings. When Dad forgot his meds, I was the one on the phone with his doctors. No thanks needed, just a constant expectation. I guess when you do your job too well, they start to think you're built for it. I parked outside their house again. The lights were still on. I walked back to the door, slower this time. Marlene opened it, arms crossed. "Can I just say hi to Dad?" I asked. She shook her head. "Dad doesn't need your drama right now." Drama. That's what she called loyalty. I looked past her, tried to catch a glimpse of the old man in his recliner, maybe half asleep, maybe wondering where I was. But I saw nothing. Just shadows. I whispered, almost to myself, "So that's what loyalty buys these days." Marlene didn't flinch. "Family is where you're supposed to be safe. Not sacrificed," I murmured, stepping back. I walked to my car, started the engine. The headlights hit the house for one final moment before I pulled away. No tears. Just resolve. That was the beginning. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table. Tea in hand. Phone face down. I didn't want to see any messages. I wasn't ready to explain something I didn't understand. I scrolled anyway. Old texts, me saying sure. No worries. I'll handle it. Every message a little breadcrumb of a woman stretching herself too thin. I was never the one with the loudest voice. I was just the one they always counted on, until they didn't need me anymore. I pressed play on an old voicemail from Mom. Her voice soft. "Just checking in, sweetheart. Love you. We're proud of you." She left it months ago. Funny how it sounded like goodbye now. I saved the message. Didn't know why. Didn't delete it either. I opened a journal, something I hadn't touched in years. Started writing, line after line. Not just about tonight. But the missed birthdays, the unspoken slights, the quiet expectations that bled me dry. This time, I'll carry the truth. Even if I carry it alone. They may have locked me out, but they forgot, I was the one holding the keys to everything they want to hide. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear, but because my mind wouldn't quit running. I kept replaying Marlene's voice, the way she stood in the doorway like a stranger with my blood. I stared at the kitchen ceiling for hours, wondering what exactly I'd done that warranted exile. The sun had barely touched the blinds when my phone rang. I expected a spam call or maybe a delayed apology that had somehow found its way through guilt. But the voice on the other end was calm, professional. Ms. Olivia Branson? This is Mark Wells from Eastern Heritage Bank. I just need to confirm some information with you regarding a joint account. I paused. I'm sorry, what account? It's a family trust account, he continued. You're listed as a co-owner. The primary account holder was your father, Mr. George Branson. I sat up straighter. My dad? There must be a mistake, I said, reaching for a notepad. I was never told about any trust. He cleared his throat. It was opened several years ago. Your name and social security number match exactly. He signed all necessary documentation. You're legal co-holder of this account, and the trust includes a property deed. Property? Can you send me the paperwork? I asked, pulse rising. I already have. Check your email. The call ended with a polite thank you, but I didn't feel grateful, I felt exposed. Something about the tone in his voice wasn't just formal, it was layered. Careful. Like he knew he'd just dropped a match on a dry forest. I opened the email. The account had been created 6 years ago. That wasn't recent. That wasn't an oversight. That was deliberate. Maybe silence had benefits I never asked for. I stood and walked to the back closet, past coats and holiday decorations I hadn't touched since Mom passed. There, tucked inside an old shoebox, was a faded blue notebook. Dad used to jot down everything from grocery lists to sermon notes in it. The pages smelled like old paper and aftershave. One tab had a rusted paperclip attached. On it, in his unmistakable scrawl, for when they forget who you are. My throat tightened. Inside were bank numbers. A timeline. My name. My initials written again and again next to asset codes. This wasn't sloppy record keeping. This was intention. He knew this day would come. I traced the ink with my finger. He hadn't told me because that wasn't his way. He didn't lecture. He documented. Some fathers give speeches. Mine gave legal signatures. The next morning, I drove to the bank branch. It sat between a barber shop and a post office, the kind of place that hadn't changed since the Reagan years. The floors creaked. A scent of lemon polish hung in the air. Mr. Wells met me with a firm handshake. Yes, everything checks out, he confirmed. Your father made it official. Your name's on the deed. It's a joint trust. This document, he said, holding a thick folder, makes you legally entitled to the property. The other family members aren't listed. My hands didn't tremble from nerves. They trembled from dignity. I asked, does anyone else know about this? He shook his head. Not to my knowledge. He came alone. I nodded. That was just like him. Quiet love wrapped in legal clarity. I stepped back outside into the morning sun. The wind had picked up. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't bitter either. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt torn. If they knew I held the deed, would they treat me differently or worse? Was this power? Or a setup for more isolation? I told myself I wouldn't tell anyone yet. Especially not Marlene. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. I held the folder like a brick. Not heavy, but solid. Real. I didn't ask for it, but now that it was mine, I had to decide what to do with it. Later that evening, I stared at my phone. Nothing. No text. No apology. No explanation. So I called my niece. Just to check in. That's how I framed it. Her voice was cautious, polite in that distant way people speak when they've been instructed not to say too much. Are you okay, Aunt Olivia? She asked, tone clipped. I'm fine, I said. Heard you all had dinner again tonight. She hesitated. Yeah. Aunt Marlene thought it'd be good to keep things small. I let the silence hang. She said you're just going through something right now, she added. That was the line. That's how they'd frame it. Not that I was banished. Not that they iced me out. Just that I was unstable. Going through something. I hung up soon after. Back at my table, I opened the envelope from the bank. My name was there, next to Dad's signature. Not just on a deed, but on a sealed letter. His handwriting was shakier, but still his. If they ever shut you out, it read, remember this is still your house, too. It was sometime after dinner when my phone lit up. Just a little buzz across the counter while I was rinsing out a mug. I dried my hands, picked it up, and saw Marlene's name. The message read, "Hope you're okay. I think maybe you're reading too much into everything again." I stared at that line for a long while. Reading too much into everything again. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. The quiet, condescending tap on the head disguised as concern. That subtle way she always managed to shift the blame while appearing generous. Like she was offering an olive branch but made sure the thorns were facing me. Funny how the ones who rewrite history are always the ones who got to write it first. I sat down at my small table and pulled out one of the older family photo albums I kept tucked away, mostly out of habit. The kind with thick pages and corner pockets for the photos. I flipped through birthdays, holidays, cookouts. And I noticed it again. There I was, half visible in the background of a Christmas photo. The version hanging in Marlene's hallway had me cropped out. I remembered that day clearly. I made the stuffing, the mashed sweet potatoes, and the pies. She told me not to overdo it. We're not hosting a wedding. But then she served it all like it came from her kitchen. There was a pattern here, and I'd stopped keeping track a long time ago. Until now. I grabbed my journal and started writing. Names. Dates. What I cooked. What I was told. Who said what. Every unreturned favor. Every time they called me the strong one right before disappearing when things got hard. Somewhere in that process, I remembered Dad's binder again. The one with the trust paperwork. I hadn't gone through all of it. I pulled it back out, flipping past the cover pages and stamped documents until I found a section I'd skimmed before. There it was, Clause 17. All beneficiaries shall be notified in writing, and consent recorded prior to any sale of shared properties. I stared at that line. It was plain as day. I was never notified. Not once. But I knew, because of that newsletter Marlene sent out last year, that 3 properties had been sold. One of them used to be our grandparents' cabin. I checked the dates. The sales happened after Dad's stroke. And definitely before he passed. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just emotional exclusion anymore. This was financial erasure. Silence wasn't just loyalty, it was leverage they hoped I'd never notice. And they'd nearly been right. I sat back, staring at the ceiling like it might give me answers. Instead, I got memory. A flash from college. Marlene had used my name to sign off on some sorority paperwork, something about dues and voting. She said, "It's no big deal, Liv. We're sisters." That was her favorite phrase. We're sisters. Always used right after doing something shady. It wasn't just the trust. It was everything. The way I'd been used as the fallback, the babysitter, the stand-in, the emotional punching bag. And when I finally said no, I was labeled the problem. They didn't just ignore me, they erased me, in increments. I wrote down a list: gaslighting, triangulation, guilt tripping, isolation. All those terms I'd read in articles but never dared apply to my family. I spent an hour researching covert emotional abuse, realizing just how common it was, especially among women raised to keep the peace. I wasn't overreacting. I had just been trained not to react at all. The next morning, I called a local estate attorney. Quietly. I booked a consultation under my middle name. I showed him the clause, the deed, the transaction dates. He looked through it with the kind of expression professionals use when they know something stinks but can't say it outright until the paperwork's in order. "You have grounds," he said. "Possibly breach of fiduciary duty, depending on who executed the sales." I nodded but said nothing. "You're in a position of strength," he added. I didn't feel strong. "You can ask for justice when you're still trying to protect the guilty," I said. It slipped out before I even realized it. He looked at me a beat longer and nodded. By the time I got home, dusk had settled in. I didn't turn on the lights. Just sat by the window, watching the last light drop behind the trees. Then I wrote a letter. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I read it aloud. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just honest. I let the paper sit on the table and didn't move. The grief sat in my chest like something I'd been holding since childhood but didn't have a name for until now. My phone buzzed again. It was my niece. A meme. A cartoon of a woman crying into a glass of wine, captioned, "When drama queens don't get their way." I deleted it without replying. "They don't even know what's coming," I whispered. Then I walked over to my laptop, Opened the folder buried inside 3 layers of distractions. I'd labeled it contingency plan a year ago and forgotten about it. Now I began scanning and uploading everything: deeds, bank docs, notes, letters. I wasn't planning to burn bridges, but if they lit the match, I'd make sure they stood downwind. I woke up before the light reached the blinds. Not because I had to. Just couldn't sleep. My body felt stiff, my chest tight like I'd been bracing against something in my sleep. That letter from Dad. The deed. The joint account. It wasn't just the surprise of it, it was the feeling that someone had known I'd need proof. That they saw it coming even before I did. I made a pot of coffee I didn't finish, then sat at the kitchen table, staring at my inbox. That's when I saw it, an email buried in my spam folder, timestamped at 2:17 a.m. Subject line: Family Trust Audit Request, Status Notification. No name. Just a form number and a contact email. My stomach dropped. I opened it. It was a copy of a request filed under my father's name, dated back almost 8 months before he died. I rubbed my temples. This was getting deeper. And I didn't even know how far the bottom went. It's like the walls knew I was coming. By 10, I'd pulled on jeans, grabbed a scarf, and was driving toward the county records office. The kind of building you pass 100 times and never go in: brick front, faded parking stripes, and old fluorescent lights inside that made everything look pale. The woman at the desk was helpful but cautious. I gave her my name, my father's, the trust reference number, and a request for any property transaction records attached to it. She raised an eyebrow. Some of these were sealed by request, she said. I didn't respond. Just waited. After some clicking and printing, she handed me a stack of thin paper files. You might want to look at parcel 41A7 first, she added, quietly. Back at the archive tables, I opened it. One of the properties, land that used to be in our family for 3 generations, had been sold 6 years ago. My name was listed under the original ownership, but there was no consent form with my signature. Just a single authorization marked by Marlene. I took a photo of it. Another file showed a commercial parcel, also sold. Again, no signature from me. A note at the bottom said, beneficiary designation sealed, per request of majority holder. My name wasn't even on the transaction copy. Majority holder. That's how she saw herself. Not as a sister. As the one holding the reins. A quiet dread set in, slow and sour. It wasn't a mistake. This had been done carefully. When I got home, I tossed my coat over the back of the couch and opened my laptop. My fingers moved before I fully thought it through. I logged into the old family email Marlene set up years ago just for household updates. I hadn't checked it in a while. There it was. A folder I'd never seen before, tucked deep under drafts and old photos. Support. I clicked it open. It held scans of bank deposits, my own transfers from the last decade, deposits I'd made into Marlene's account to help with Dad's prescriptions, home repairs, even groceries. I'd forgotten half of them. Then I saw the video file. Holiday 2015, cooking help. I hesitated. Clicked. It was a short clip. Me, in the kitchen, apron on, stirring something on the stove. You could hear the others laughing from the living room. Marlene's voice came through clearer than the rest. Don't worry, Sav, this'll be our secret. No one has to know you saved Christmas again. I paused the video. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I copied the file to a separate drive. Then I buried a duplicate inside a locked folder and changed the password. I sat back in my chair. They never praised me publicly. But they sure knew where to point when it suited them. It wasn't just the lies. It was the silence. The kind you're forced into until it becomes second nature. I pulled my journal close, flipped to a blank page, and wrote, I was never invisible because they forgot me, I was invisible because they crafted a world without me. And then I just sat long enough to remember every dinner table I wasn't invited to. Every gift exchange where I got a last-minute candle while others unwrapped jewelry. Every laugh I heard through a phone speaker but wasn't part of. It wasn't grief anymore. It was something quieter. Sharper. Resolve. I reopened my email and sent a message to my aunt in North Carolina. She used to handle some of the family's notary work. I asked if she could help verify a deed signature. Then I scheduled a consult with a forensic accountant. Quietly. Nothing flashy. Just a 30-minute Zoom next Tuesday. Then I texted Ro, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in months. Just a simple line. I found more than I bargained for. After that, I made tea, backed up the video file again, and locked it behind a new password. I changed my system login. Switched the cloud settings. I wasn't being paranoid. I was just catching up. And then, right as I was about to shut the screen, my phone buzzed. No name. Just a number. And an image file. I opened it. A deed. My name. But Marlene's hand, literally, was in the picture. Holding her thumb over part of the signature block. I stared at the screenshot until I couldn't tell if I was shaking or breaking. I printed the deed out in silence. Highlighted the signature area. One line was typed, mine. The other scrawled in pen, Marlene's handwriting, unmistakable. The curve in the L like she was still practicing cursive. She'd done this before. On notes to teachers, permission slips, cards for our dad when I was out of state. But this time, it wasn't a birthday card. It was a legal document. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I walked over to the dining table, laid out the original my father had notarized before he passed, next to the one I just printed. Side by side. Truth and fiction. Plain as day. That night, I set up a family video call. Said it was to clarify some family records. Kept it vague. They all showed up. Marlene with her wine glass and forced smile. Our niece Olivia, earbuds in, scrolling something off screen. Aunt Clara, quiet as usual, probably called in just to keep the peace. I shared my screen. Before we get into anything, I started, calm but flat. I want to show two versions of one document. The one on the left is from Dad's notary file. The one on the right was used in a property transfer last year. I zoomed in on the signatures. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's fraud. The silence was thick. No one moved. Marlene blinked, then leaned forward. You always take things so literally, Savina. You don't understand how complicated it was trying to manage everything. She waved her hand like she was brushing off crumbs. Dad wanted me to handle things. You were never around much. We needed someone local. Olivia spoke up then, her voice light but biting. Aunt Savina, I think you're coming across a little aggressive. I didn't flinch. No. I'm coming across informed. Marlene narrowed her eyes. You go public with this, you'll ruin the family name. You'll drag everyone down with you. Do you really want that? I held her stare. If I kept silent to protect a name, I'd lose myself. That was the moment it shifted. For me. I didn't want their agreement. I didn't even need their understanding. I just needed them to hear me, and know I wasn't asking any more. You have 72 hours, I said, voice steady. To draft and submit a joint letter to the bank acknowledging my full legal stake in the trust and all communications moving forward. No exceptions. Marlene leaned back. Or what? Or I begin legal proceedings. I've already consulted attorneys, I've documented the forgery, I have witness statements, and I've secured every file. I watched her face change. Not scared. Cornered. And she hated it. I didn't ask for this power, I said, but I won't pretend I don't have it anymore. No one replied. The screen flickered as they signed off one by one. That night, my phone rang. Aunt Clara. I'm sorry, she said, voice thin. I always thought something was off. I just didn't want to stir the pot. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I told her. I'm asking you to tell the truth. That's all. A few hours later, I noticed Olivia had unfollowed me on everything. Then I saw her post a quote, some people love drama more than peace. No name. Just implication. I didn't even blink. Because that night, I remembered something Dad once told me after a church cookout, when Marlene had taken credit for something I made. You don't have to shout to be heard, he said. Just speak the truth where it matters. 3 days passed. No call. No email. Nothing. Then, without warning, a new message appeared. No subject. No greeting. Just a PDF attachment. It wasn't a joint letter. It was a cease and desist. Drafted by Marlene's lawyer. Accusing me of defamation, familial disruption, and attempted trust interference. I opened it. Read every line. Didn't blink once. Then I opened a blank Word doc. Typed the header in bold. Intent to sue, trust mismanagement and forgery. And I just began. The email sat in my inbox like a ticking clock. I read it once, twice, then again, trying to catch something I'd missed. But the words were plain: someone had submitted a request to change the name on the deed. And that someone wasn't me. It didn't feel like a mistake. This was deliberate. Calculated. I opened the attached PDF. There it was. My father's property, the house I grew up in, the one Marlene swore she didn't care about. The new owner field was blank, pending approval. I didn't move for a few seconds. Just stared. My name had been on that document since Dad died. Legally assigned, notarized. What they were doing wasn't just deceit, it was erasure. By morning, I had printed the notice, highlighted the timestamps, and stapled it to my growing stack of evidence. Then I called the bank, asked for a formal hold on any changes pending fraud investigation. They agreed, temporarily. After that, I drove across town to Mom's old lawyer. Not my lawyer. Hers. A man named Harold Gunn who handled our family's affairs back when things still made sense. He looked at the paperwork through thick glasses, then leaned back in his chair. "This isn't just dirty," he muttered. "It's desperate." I didn't argue. I just asked for help filing an injunction. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, thinking back to every moment I gave Marlene the benefit of the doubt. Every time I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Every time I walked away instead of calling her out. Not anymore. On the way home, I stopped by my old church. It wasn't Sunday, but the doors were open, and the sanctuary was empty. I didn't pray. I just sat in the third pew, hands folded, staring at the altar like it could answer the question that kept turning in my head: how far would she go? I didn't cry. I didn't feel fear. What I felt was more dangerous: resolve. That night, I posted another video. Again, I didn't mention names. I simply said, if someone tries to take your name off your own life, you don't yell. You document. You protect what's yours. It went viral. People started messaging me, strangers, friends, even a woman from high school I hadn't spoken to in years. One comment stuck with me: I went through the same thing with my sister. Don't back down. The next day, I walked into a mediation meeting Marlene had requested. She sat there with her new lawyer, slick, polished, smiling like she already won. I let them speak first. Accusations wrapped in civility. When it was my turn, I pulled out my folder: deed copies, the email, the timeline, the video transcripts, the anonymous HR complaint. I spoke like I was reading a grocery list. Calm. Precise. The mediator turned to Marlene and asked, "Did you submit the name change request?" She didn't answer directly. Just smiled and said, "It must have been a miscommunication." I looked her dead in the eye. You don't get to gaslight paper trails. Later that evening, back at home, I made myself a grilled cheese. Sat on the porch, watched the sky turn purple. I remembered how Dad used to say, "You can't reason with a storm. You just board up and wait it out." But I wasn't boarding up. I was building back. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from my cousin Dylan. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. He wrote, "I think it's time we talked. I know more than you think." Tess showed up just as I was pulling up the driveway. I wasn't expecting company. I opened the door to find her holding a stack of papers. She looked nervous, shifting her weight, glancing sideways. "Hi," she said. "Can I borrow those deed documents you printed the other day?" I motioned her inside, closed the door behind her, then watched as she settled in the living room. I handed her the papers. She thumbed through, then froze, lips moving slightly. "She said you're just the money one, not the real sister." Tess blurted it out before I could stop her. My throat tightened. Her words hung in the air. My heart threatened to lurch. Others in the room, Ro, the aunt, stared. Marlene, on speakerphone somewhere, caught the phrase too. She gasped and said, "Oh Tess, where'd you hear that?" As though it was a wrong turn in conversation. Damage done. Children see what adults hide. Later that afternoon, I drove to Bellamy's interior design studio where she was hosting a rebranding event. The place was buzzing, lights, champagne, guests chatting over hors d'oeuvres. She took the stage. Her face was polished, confident. "I invested the family's money into this renovation," she announced. "I turned this landmark house into something new and beautiful for our community." The applause rose. I walked in quietly. Waited. When her speech ended, I approached a group of guests clustered near her display panels. "Beautiful work," I said, voice soft but clear. "You know, the investment came from contributions I made years ago. This renovation, my money was in it too." Some faces shifted. Marlene's smile faltered. She tried to interject, "Oh Savina, that was just the family support," but her voice cracked under the weight of watching me expose the underside of what she'd been claiming. I held her gaze. "Reputation built on borrowed power is fragile." Loud enough for those nearest to hear. People glanced at one another. I stepped back, leaving her to catch up. Back home, I opened my phone. On Bellamy's social media, a new post, her in a redesigned living room, captioned my vision, my design. Under it, a comment I left, "Beautiful room, built on someone else's shoulders." It stayed online for minutes, then vanished. I took screenshots of the deleted comment and every reaction it got. Then I posted myself, "They stole credit, but they can't steal the facts." That post stayed. She issued a press release through her team, "Family funds invested responsibly. Claims to the contrary are attempts to rewrite our narrative." It went to local blogs, design publications, community groups. Friends and clients forwarded it to me, expecting reaction. I didn't let it rile me. I closed my journal, took a breath, and settled in. Truth doesn't fight fire with fire. It endures. Bellamy's lawyer threatened defamation, but I had that letter she sent, the notarized papers, the timeline. I wasn't bluffing. I reminded myself, if they want war, they'll get one they can't spin. That evening, her gallery opening event took place. The new project she claimed as hers was displayed under bright lights. Media gathered. Community members, neighbors, designers. I arrived quietly, holding folders. Inside, she welcomed guests, thanked supporters, praised her visionary skill. The room pulsed with admiration. I slipped into the back, started handing out printouts, clear copies of the deed, the trust paper trail, her own signature discrepancy. A few media people accepted them. Murmurs rose. She saw me. The crowd parted. Cameras turned. "This house, this project, it's mine too," I said as I stepped forward. "I just never asked to be seen." Flashbulbs popped. She began to speak, lips parting. Then behind her, my lawyer appeared. With quiet authority he said, "We have filed for an immediate injunction demanding half the equity." Marlene's face went pale. The room stiffened. The cameras stayed fixed. I stood tall, silent, letting the weight of what I'd exposed land where it needed to. The battle lines weren't drawn by me, they were revealed. Today, everyone saw the border. I woke before dawn. Couldn't sleep anyway. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries weight. I made coffee, spread out every file on the kitchen table, the deeds, letters, screenshots, timestamps, all of it. Today wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about record and proof. I printed the final notices and slid them into envelopes, one to Marlene, one to her lawyer, one to the county records office. Each certified. Each signed. Then I sent a message to Corvin Hale, the title officer. "Be at the Bellamy property at 3 p.m., I wrote. "Bring the original record chain." As the sun rose, I stood by the window and said to myself, "Today, the world will see what I've carried in silence." Then I dressed, not for battle, but for clarity. Dark jacket, hair tied back, silver watch from my father. By 9, I was walking into the courthouse beside my lawyer, a steady man named Grant Lewis. He carried the injunction papers like they were gospel. Inside the hearing room, everything moved fast, motions, counter-motions, murmurs from both sides. Grant spoke first, his voice even. "We are filing an emergency injunction against fraudulent deed modification and breach of trust. All relevant evidence is included." He placed a binder on the table, scans of the altered deed, bank statements showing withdrawals from joint family accounts, and the transcript of Tessa's accidental confession. The clerk stamped each page. Marlene's lawyer stood, feigning disbelief. "These are defamatory claims, Your Honor, pure manipulation." Grant didn't flinch. "You can contest evidence," he said, turning to them. "You can't contest facts." I sat quietly. The judge looked over the documents, nodded once, and marked the case received. That was the first real sound of justice I'd heard in years, the stamp hitting paper. By early afternoon, Corvin Hale called to confirm arrival at the property. "I'll be meeting her staff first," he said. "You should come soon after." When I got there, cars lined the curb. The studio crew was setting up for another photo shoot. Bellamy's assistants fluttered around like nothing was wrong. Then Corvin showed up, crisp white shirt, clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "Title verification for the Caro property." Bellamy's lead assistant frowned. "I'm sorry, this belongs to Mrs. Caro, Bellamy Caro." Corvin shook his head, calm as stone. "Legally, it does not. According to the recorded chain of title, this property belongs to Olivia Caro." He turned the document around. The embossed seal caught the light. "Per the injunction, this ownership record will be entered back into the county database effective immediately." The room went still. Bellamy stood near the staircase, pale, clutching the banister. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Neighbors gathered outside, watching. Someone whispered my name. I stepped through the doorway, first time I'd set foot there in weeks. The scent of the wood floors hit me, familiar and foreign all at once. The deputies arrived next. Polite, procedural. They handed Bellamy the official order, "Vacate partial residence by evening." She tried pleading, but the words bounced off paper stronger than her voice. Marlene rushed forward, tears half real, half performance. "You can't do this to your sister." I looked at her and said quietly, "You already did." Boxes came out. Movers took down frames, rolled up rugs. I didn't lift a hand to help, didn't gloat. This wasn't victory, it was correction. Bellamy passed me in the hallway, holding the old family teacup set. Her hand trembled. For a second, she looked like a child again, lost. Then she set the cups down on the counter and walked out without a word. By dusk, the house was empty except for me, Corvin, and the echo of everything that had been stolen and returned. Outside, cameras clicked. A few neighbors clapped. Others stayed quiet, ashamed of how easily they'd believe the lies. I turned toward them. "You never saw me," I said. "You only saw what you wanted to believe. But you can't rewrite the law, or the truth." Corvin nodded. "Deed transfer effective immediately," he announced. Marlene stood at the gate, eyes wet. "You never gave me the choice," she said, voice breaking. I met her stare. "Neither did you." Then I turned, walked through the doorway, and stepped back into the home that had always been mine. The phone in my pocket buzzed, a new voicemail. I pressed play. My father's voice, rough with age, filled the room. "I hoped you'd understand one day," he said. "You were never just a daughter, this was always yours." His words hit harder than any courtroom win. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't weigh me down. It felt earned. The first thing I noticed that morning was the silence. Not the kind that presses heavy, like grief, but the kind that gives space to breathe. My feet touched the hardwood floor, and for a second, I just stood there, listening. No Bellamy shouting into her phone. No Tess tiptoeing to avoid attention. Just stillness. I walked through the house, room by room. Each corner held a ghost. The edge of the kitchen counter where my father would set down his coffee mug. The scuff marks on the hallway wall from when I was 11 and ran too fast with roller shoes. I opened drawers, one by one, not looking for anything, just letting the past show itself. There was a chipped photo frame buried under paper receipts. My mother's handwriting on an old envelope. The pantry still smelled faintly like cinnamon, the way it did every winter. And yet, this wasn't a museum anymore. It was mine now. I started pulling the curtains off the rods, letting light pour in. Not tearing it down, not replacing every trace of them, just shifting the space. Reclaiming breath. Framing one of the old quotes I'd found in a drawer above the entryway mirror, "Sometimes the strongest walls are made of forgiveness." I didn't feel that yet. But I hoped I would. By late morning, the mail truck had stopped out front. I wasn't expecting anything, but there it was, certified envelope, return address, the bank. Inside were documents I read 3 times before I could stand still. My name, Olivia Caro, listed not only on the deed but also as the sole beneficiary of a trust my father has left behind. Funds, records, backdated transfers. And taped to the back, folded like a forgotten prayer, a short note in his handwriting: "You always carried us, Olivia. This was my way of carrying you." I sat down. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I needed the world to stop spinning long enough to understand that I hadn't been forgotten. I had been protected. My father didn't shout his love, he built it into walls, trusts, deeds, and silence. And now, I could finally hear it. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears had come before, when I thought I was invisible. Now, I just felt full. Like I'd been walking with a weight I didn't know I was carrying, and someone finally told me why it was there. Later that afternoon, I walked to the town hall meeting. I hadn't planned to speak. Just wanted to sit, observe. But when someone introduced me as Olivia, the Caro sister, I stood. I said, silence protected me once. But now, my voice will do the same for others. Some folks nodded. Others didn't meet my eyes. But afterward, a retired teacher, Mrs. Harding, touched my arm and whispered, "My sister disowned me over our father's estate." I didn't think anyone else knew that kind of pain. I looked her in the eyes and said, "We know. Even when no one talks about it, we know." It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about not letting the next person go through this alone. That evening, with the sun leaning low, I took the old key and unlocked my father's workshop. The wood creaked just the same. Inside, everything was as he'd left it, dusty but careful. His tools lined up in order. Journals stacked in crates. One folder had sketches of the house with little notes, legal terms, initials, quotes scribbled in margins. I flipped through a journal. He'd copied a line from Lincoln, "I'm a slow walker, but I never walk back." And beneath it, one from Maya Angelou, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." He'd been planning this. Quietly. Lovingly. And I hadn't seen it because I'd been too busy surviving. I sat on the floor, surrounded by everything he left behind, not to mourn it, but to archive it. Not to throw it away, but to pass it forward. That was my inheritance, not just the house, or the deed, but the strength to keep going. The grace to forgive. The courage to name what was stolen. And rebuild anyway. The next morning, I walked to the park with a thermos of coffee, the same way he used to. A neighbor waved. I nodded back, sat on the bench under the elm where he'd read the paper. I opened my journal and wrote a letter to Marlene. Not full of rage. Not with any demand. "You didn't break me," I wrote. "You reminded me I was whole." And as I capped my pen, set the journal aside, I looked out at the sky, wide, clean, unmoved. There was peace in that. Family isn't who you share a name with. It's who lets you keep yours. Then, just as I stood to leave, the sound of footsteps behind me. A knock echoed at the front door of the house I had walked back to with my name on the deed. I turned. Marlene stood there, holding a box, crying.